The Silver Curlew, Eleanor Farjeon, King Nollekins of Norfolk. While these things were happening in the mill and on the seashore, quite other things were taking place in the palace of the King of Norfolk, whose name, as I have already said, was Nollekins. The trouble about Nollekins was his nature. In fact, both his natures, for he had two of them. It all depended on which foot he put out of bed first when he got up. If he got out on his right foot, he was gay and generous, and full of enthusiastic plans, which, if not always easy to carry out, were always on the pleasant side of things. But if he got out on his left foot, look out for fireworks. He banged about, poked into everything, and flew into tantrums at the least provocation. Nothing was right on Nollekins' left foot days, and they generally ended in all the servants giving notice. Next day, he would be so nice that they took the notice back again. The only one who could really manage Nollekins on his bad days was Nan, his very, very, very old nurse. She had known him from his cradle and didn't so much manage him as order him. Nollekins took things from her he wouldn't stand from anybody else. And as he was still quite a young king, only 21 in fact, he hadn't dropped his habit of hanging on to her apron strings. "What's the matter with you, Nolly?" she would say, wiping the tears from his eyes. "Is your double nature?" "I can't help it, can I, Nanny?" asked Nollekins. "That's as may be," said the old Nan, "but if you can't, that makes it no better for the rest of us. If you could help it, you could try to mend it." "I will try, Nanny, really I will," said King Nollekins, and he went to the sweet shop and bought up all the toffee apples and gave one apiece to everybody. That was yesterday. Today, as old Nan was sorting the linen cupboard, she heard a great clatter and batter going on downstairs. She clicked her tongue. Nollekins at his tantrums again. She shook her head severely. She was a tiny little woman, which somehow made her severity more severe. Standing on top of a step-ladder, she unfolded a sheet and shook her head again as it fell to tatters in her hands. "What we are coming to I do not know," said old Nan. The door of the linen closet flew open, and in ran young Jen, the between maid, with her eyes popping. "The king wants fresh sheets for his bed," she gasped. "He had some only last month," said old Nan. "And a pair of pillow slips, please." "One's enough for anybody." "And please a bath towel and a face towel and a razor towel, please." "Razor towel, forsooth, at his age," sniffed old Nan. "And a tablecloth and a table napkin, and please the table napkin must be sure to match the tablecloth." "God bless us. Anything else?" inquired old Nan. "Yes," said young Jen. "A clean pocket handkerchief." The bangings downstairs grew noisier and noisier, and the next moment John the butler staggered in. "Mrs. Nan, Mrs. Nan." "What's up?" asked the little old nurse. "His Majesty the King is up," said the butler. "He's as up as a bottle of ginger pop in hot weather." "On the rampage again, is he?" said old Nan. "Rampaging something outrageous." "Ah," nodded Nan, "one of his fault-finding days." "One of his very worst. He's been down in the cellars finding fault with the cider casks, the beer barrels, the red wine, the white wine, the gooseberry wine, and me. And nothing wrong with any of us, Mrs. Nan. I shall leave this day month." Before old Nan could remark on this, in waddled Cookie, the cook. "Mrs. Nan, Mrs. Nan," she puffed. "What's the matter?" asked the little old nurse. "His Majesty's the matter." "Nollekins again. Poking in the kitchen, is he?" "Poking's the word for it. He's poked his nose in the flour bin, the sugar bags, the salt cellars, the pepper pots, the jam jars, the dripping tub, and the oven itself. Everything's wrong for him, though all's as right as rain. I shall leave this day month." Next in flew Meggs, the dairymaid, wailing, "Mrs. Nan, Mrs. Nan." What's your kettle of fish? Asked the little old nurse.
The king's my kettle of fish.
Meddling in the dairy, was he?
Meddling?
Meg threw up her hands.
He mixed the milk, he kicked the cream pans, battered the butter tubs, squeezed the cheeses and whisked the whey back into the curds just when I'd got 'em sorted out. I won't stand such goings on, that I won't. I will leave this day month.
The bangings downstairs were now positively deafening. Into the linen closet stalked Jack the gardener. He was a stolid man, not given to speeches, and he stood and stared before him till old Nan said impatiently, "Well, out with it." "Dandelions," said the gardener. "Dandelions?" "I said dandelions." "I heard you say dandelions." "Very well then," said the gardener. "Dandelions I said, and dandelions you heard. And dandelions is what I'm to grow in my flower beds from this day forth." "Who says so?" asked Nan. "Nollekins," said the gardener. "His Majesty the King?" asked Nan sharply. "Nollekins," said the gardener. "I'll thank you to speak of His Majesty respectfully." "You call him Nollekins," said the gardener. "I'm his nurse. I've seen him in his bath." "Bath or no bath," broke in the butler, "I won't have him shake up my wine bottles."
"He shan't poke his nose in my condiments," puffed the cook. "He shan't meddle with my cream pans," vowed the dairymaid.
"He shan't say what I grow in my flower beds," growled the gardener. And all four cried in one breath, "We leave this day month."
"Take 31 days' notice," shouted a furious voice from the door,
and there stood Nollekins himself, his face red with rage. He pointed his finger in turn at the butler, the cook, the dairymaid and the gardener.
"Your wine bottles, your condiments, your cream pans, your flower beds. I shall do what I like with my bottles, my condiments, my cream pans, my flower beds."
And the king banged about like a child in a temper.
"Stop it," cried Nan from the top of the ladder. "Stop it, I say, or I'll get down and spank you."
Noel stopped banging and looked at her crossly, kicking his right foot heel with his left foot toe. "Go straight into that corner," commanded Nan, "till I tell you to come out." Nollekins shuffled to the corner and stood there with his face to the wall. "And you go back to your chores," the nurse ordered John and Cookie and Meggs and Jack. "Yes, Mrs. Nan," they said meekly, and went. Old Nan beckoned to young Jen, who had stood shaking in her shoes during this angry scene. "Come you here and get what you asked for. Hold up your arms, child. I'm not made of elastic." She counted the articles as she hung them over the between maid's arms. Pair of sheets, ditto pillow slips, tablecloth, ditto napkin, bath towel, face towel, razor ditto. At his age, sniffed old Nan. For though he was 21, Nollekins would always be a little boy to her, and if he had been 51, it would have been all the same. Was that the lot?
"Pocket hanky, please,"
whispered young Jen. "Ah," said old Nan, "we've a use for that here. Get along, and don't be all time about it." Young Jen got along in no time, and old Nan fetched out a fresh linen handkerchief smelling of lavender. "Come here," she commanded Nollekins, not unkindly. He came, hanging his head, and stood by the ladder, where his chin came level with the old woman's shoulder. "Wipe eyes," said Nan, dabbing the tears away. "Blow nose." Nollekins blew hard into the handkerchief. "Going to be a good boy now?" asked Nan.
"Yes, Nanny,"
sniffed Nollekins. "Very well then." Old Nan sat down on the ladder top and wagged her finger at him. "What do you want to go being such a bad boy for?"
"How can I help it, Nanny? It's one of my bad days. You know how it is," explained Nollekins. "Some days I'm just good and some days I'm just bad. I've got a double nature, haven't I?" So's everybody, said old Nan. Not so double as mine, said Nollekins quickly. When I'm good, I'm very, very good. When you are bad, began his nurse. Yes, I'm horrid, I know. But, Nanny, things do upset me so. That's no reason for upsetting things, said Nan. Isn't it, though? What upset you this morning? Asked Nan. Got out of bed the wrong side? Both sides of my bed are the wrong side, complained Nollekins. And the top and the bottom. The sheets are as full of holes as a sheet of postage stamps. Look at that! He pulled out of his pouch a fine linen sheet that crumpled into shreds as it came. And look at that, said old Nan. She put her hand in the cupboard and shook out the sheet that was its very twin. And that, she went on, showing him a tattered pillow slip. And that, and that, and that. She produced towels, cloths and napkins, all in the same state. You don't have to tell me, said old Nan. But, Nanny, they're a disgrace, shouted the king. They're a scandal, said his nurse. We must get some new ones, this instant. Tell me where. There's no more linen to be had in the land. I shall tell the gardener to grow flax instead of dandelions, Nolly decided. Oh, there's flax and to spare, said she. Flax and flax and flax. Lift me down. Nollekins lifted the little old thing off the ladder and she pulled open the door of a huge store cupboard. There you are. Nollekins looked in and saw that the cupboard was stuffed to repletion with bales of raw flax. Well then, he exclaimed. Who's to spin it? She asked. The girls, said Nollekins. The girls, forsooth, scoffed Nan. Much you know about girls. The girls nowadays are all giddy gadabouts or idle good-for-noughts. You spin it then, suggested Nollekins. You used to be a topping spinster, Nanny. Used to be, said old Nan. All of a sudden her old cheeks wrinkled and crinkled, and flopping down on the heap of flax, she began to cry. My spinning days are dead and gone, she wept. Nollekins simply couldn't bear to see women cry. He picked up his little nurse, sat down on a chair and jigged her up and down on his knee. There, Nanny, there. Such a handful as you've been, old Nan wept jerkily. Such a handful as you are. There, jiggled Nollekins. I'm a good boy now. Till the next time comes along. You'll be the death of an old body like me, you will. I'll never be a handful any more, promised Nolly. You think you won't, but you will, wept old Nan. What can be done about it, Nanny? You ought to get married. Ought I, Nanny? You really did ought, and take yourself off my poor old shoulders, Nolly. There, Nanny, I will. Nollekins was ready to promise her anything if only she'd stopped crying. She did so, very suddenly, and sat up on his knee exceedingly spry. You will you? Go picking some giddy gadabout or an idle good-for-nought, I know you. I'll pick the best spinster in Norfolk, Nanny, said Nollekins, all to please you. She better had pleased me, but don't tell me. You'll pick her to please yourself. King Nollekins pointed to the bundles of flax toppling out of the cupboard. I'll pick anyone who can spin that. Old Nan hopped off his knee in a trice. Come along, she cried. Come along. What for, Nanny? To find her, of course. Do you mean my bride? I mean the one girl in Norfolk, said old Nan, who can spin that flax.